Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Indian External Affairs Minister Jaishankar tells US Secretary of State Marco Rubio Kashmir attackers must face justice, while Pakistan Sharif pushes the US to rein in India. Washington also says Rubio called both sides, urging Pakistan and India to dial down tensions after the deadly attack in Pahalgam. The US and Ukraine signed a landmark deal to jointly develop energy and mineral resources crucial for war recovery and military aid. Washington also launches a reconstruction fund as part of a strategic push to counter China's control of critical minerals. Russian drones strike Odessa, killing 2 and injuring 5 as fires erupt, and homes, a school and a supermarket are damaged. Ukrainian officials say rescuers are battling blazes as infrastructure across the city takes a direct hit. North Korea begins building its first road bridge to Russia, calling it a major step in bolstering ties amid growing military cooperation. The move comes as Pyongyang confirms troop support for Russia in Ukraine, deepening their strategic alliances despite global sanctions. The Kremlin says Putin's open to peace with Ukraine but warns against rushing a deal as fighting intensifies on the ground. Ukrainian forces say Russian attacks are escalating, even as Putin claims Kiev troops remain trapped in Russia's Kursk region. The Trump administration has quietly approached China for talks after imposing a 145% tariff, Chinese media states. Washington is reportedly using multiple channels to open dialogue on growing trade fallout. Israel carries out a strike in Syria against extremists attacking the Druze following deadly sectarian violence near Damascus. Syria rejects foreign intervention, claiming to protect all groups, including the Druze, amid the escalating conflict. US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth warns Iran of consequences for backing Houthi attacks, even as nuclear talks quietly resume. 3 rounds of indirect talks mediated by Oman aim to stop Iran from going nuclear while easing sanctions. Tensions between India and Pakistan continue to escalate following the deadly Pahalgam terror attack. Pakistan violated the ceasefire along the line of control for the 7th consecutive night, with small arms firing targeting multiple sectors in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. In response, India has closed its airspace to all Pakistan-owned flights, a reciprocal move after Pakistan imposed a similar ban on Indian carriers. India's foreign minister has demanded that the perpetrators of the Pahalgam attack be brought to justice. Pakistan, however, denies involvement and warns of a strong response to any escalation by India. The country's deputy prime minister has said that any further provocation will be met decisively. Meanwhile, Pakistan has named the ISI Chief Lieutenant General Mohammed Asim Malik as its new national security advisor. He will hold the NSA role in addition to leading the powerful spy agency. On the diplomatic front, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif accused India of provoking tensions during a call with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Meanwhile, Rubio urged Pakistan to condemn the attack and cooperate in the investigation. As these developments unfold, both countries continue their nightly exchanges of fire, with the international community calling for de-escalation. We now move over to the United States, where the US has signed a deal with Ukraine on the joint application of its energy and mineral resources after months of tense negotiations. The 2 countries have agreed to establish a reconstruction investment fund to spur Ukraine's economic recovery from its war with Russia. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it showed both sides were committed to lasting peace and prosperity in Ukraine. For Kiev, the deal is seen as essential to accessing US military aid. Let's take a listen in to what Scott Bessent had to say.
President Trump's tireless efforts to secure a lasting peace I am glad to announce the signing of today's historic economic partnership agreement between the United States and Ukraine, establishing the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. This partnership allows the United States to invest alongside Ukraine to unlock Ukraine's growth assets, mobilize American talent, capital, and governance standards that will improve Ukraine's investment climate and accelerate Ukraine's economic recovery.
According to the statement from the United States Treasury on Wednesday afternoon, the newly created US-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund recognizes the significant financial and material support the US has given Ukraine since Russia invaded in February of 2022. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Yulia Shevchenko, who flew to Washington to ink the deal on Wednesday, said in a post on X that the new fund would attract global investment into our country. Listing the deal's provisions, he said it would involve projects in minerals, oil and gas, although the resources would remain the property of Ukraine. The minister also reiterated the partnership will be equal on a 50-50 basis, she added further, that the deal will be the first ratified by Ukrainian lawmakers. In a related development, Russian drones attacked Ukraine's Black Sea port city of Odessa in intense strikes today, killing 2 people and injuring 5 more, in addition to sparking fires and damaging infrastructure. Oleg Keeper, the governor of Odessa, wrote on a Telegram messaging app that the enemy attack damaged residential high-rises, private houses, a supermarket, a school and cars. Ukraine's state-owned railway department also said that the overnight attack also damaged its tracks, the contact network and 3 other freight cars. This happened amid the peace talks when the Kremlin said Putin is open to peace in Ukraine and intense work is ongoing with the United States. However, the conflict is so complex that the rapid progress seems difficult. The Ukrainian officials have expressed confusion with the constant strikes amid peace conversations. Zelensky also reiterated that he is not happy with the 3-day ceasefire and expects at least a 30-day deal. Let's listen in to what the Russian foreign minister had to say about the ceasefire conversations.
Предложение, которое президент Путин озвучил, это начало прямых переговоров без предварительных условий. Перемирие в данной ситуации рассматривается как предварительные условия, которое будет использовано для дальнейшей поддержки киевского режима, укрепления его военных способностей. Помните, когда перемирие, которое предложил президент Трамп в виде моратория на удары по объектам энергетической инфраструктуры, и которое полностью было соблюдено в течение 30 дней российской стороной, оно никак не повлияло на агрессивные действия киевского режима. Нарушений было, по-моему, пара сотен.
The Kremlin has claimed that Russian forces had fully recaptured the territory of the Kursk Oblast. However, this declaration of victory, President Vladimir Putin acknowledged the day before that Ukrainian soldiers still remain in the region. Speaking at an event in Moscow, Putin further stated that remaining Ukrainian forces are requesting evacuation from their commanders. They've been pushed out of Kursk Oblast, but remnants are still hiding in cracks and basements and asking to be evacuated, the Russian president said. Meanwhile, Ukraine's top military commander, Alexander Syrsky, said that Russian forces have greatly increased their attacks in eastern Ukraine despite the ongoing truce discussions. We turn now to the Middle East, where tensions are once again flaring in Syria as deadly sectarian violence near Damascus spirals alongside fresh Israeli airstrikes. Syrian state media says Israeli forces targeted areas near Sarnaya, southwest of the capital, killing at least 2 people. Israel says the strike was a warning action to stop what it called an extremist group preparing to attack the Druze community. It comes after nearly 40 people were killed in just 2 days of brutal clashes between Druze, Sunni group and government forces. The violence, which began in Jaramana, was repeatedly triggered by a voice message deemed offensive to the Prophet Muhammad. Israel's military says 3 wounded Syrian Druze have been evacuated into Israel for treatment. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned the Syrian regime to act or face more military pressure. The Syrian government has condemned the strikes and pledged to protect all communities, including the Druze. Authorities say security has now been restored in Syria, with hundreds of Interior Ministry forces deployed following talks with local Druze leaders. The governor of Damascus suburbs say weapons must remain solely in the hands of the state to avoid further unrests. The United Nations' envoy for Syria has called the situation unacceptable and has warned of a dangerous escalation. Meanwhile, Turkey has called on Israel to immediately halt its aerial operations, and Lebanon's Druze leader has urged Syrian Druze to reject what he called Israeli interference. And we are now joined by Martin Saar-Arias, foreign affairs analyst located in Frankfurt, Germany. Martin, thank you very much for joining us on the program. What exactly does Syria mean when it says it rejects foreign intervention? Is this a message to Israel, the United States, or others active in Syria's airspace?
Well, according to timing, because of the Israeli strikes, I think this message was to Israel. However, not only to Israel. We need to remember that the new regime in Syria under Ahmed al-Sharas basically shifting the Syrian foreign policy. Right now we see that for this new regime, Russia and mainly Iran are the major enemies for the Syrian regime. Nonetheless, this new regime wanted to approach Israel through the US. But I think because of these new strikes, the tension between Syria and Israel are going to be further. However, I think this message is not only for Israel, but for everyone who wants to use Syrian aerial space. And this is a message not only for Israel, but also for Iran and for every sectarian group that wants to be against this regime's interests.
Yes, and as you've said, Syria is rejecting foreign intervention, yet Russia and Iran play a major role in Syria's military posture right now. How do you analyze their role, particularly when it comes to defending against Israeli attacks?
So I think that right now, I don't think Syria is aligned with the rest of Israel's enemies because of this new policy being implemented by this new regime. I think this new regime wants to approach more the US because for them, the major threat for Syria is the Iranian regime and its proxies, such as its proxies in Lebanon and throughout the Middle East. I do think the new policy of Syria is be completely against any external intervention, not only Israeli, because the foreign Assad regime rejected every Western intrusion to Syria. But this new regime is going to be completely against any kind of intrusion, especially from Iran and Russia. I don't think Syria is going to be involved in a major attack towards Israel. I think the tension between Israel and Syria will remain, but it's not going to cooperate with Israel's enemies.
Yes, Martin, and finally, do you see this as part of a wider escalation in the region, especially after Israel's operations in Lebanon and Gaza? And do keep in mind that this is not the first attack by Israel on Syria either.
I don't think this is going to be part of a major escalation in the Middle East. I think this is going to be absolutely isolated between tensions between Israel and Syria. I don't think Syria is interested right now under this administration to cooperate with other parties in the Middle East because they themselves are being enemies of these other players in the Middle East. I don't think Syria is going to cooperate with Syria. I don't think, with Iran. I don't think Syria is going to cooperate with Lebanon or with the Houthis or with the Palestinians or any terror organization in the Gaza Strip. I think they're going to try to completely isolate themselves, try to cooperate with the US and try to being very skeptical about other powers in the Middle East. Unfortunately, I think the path of peace between Israel and Syria, which under this current administration in Syria, they wanted to approach Israel, this is going to be deteriorated. However, I don't think it's going to be part of a huge war in the Middle East. I think this is isolated.
Martin Saar Arias, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let's now move to North America, where the US economy has unexpectedly shrunk in the first quarter of this year, as the nation's GDP contracted by 0.3%. This marks the first quarterly decline since 2022. In a surge of imports driven by stockpiling ahead of Donald Trump's new tariffs is being blamed for the downturn. The US Commerce Department also pointed to a drop in consumer and government spending. While some economists say private investment could help the economy rebound soon, President Trump is shifting the blame to his predecessor. Speaking at a cabinet meeting, Trump called the contraction Biden's economy, adding that the GDP decline reflected distortions from imports and government spending. Let's take a listen in to what Donald Trump had to say.
Core GDP, and this is, you probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is the quarterly numbers. And we came in and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country in so many ways. Not only at the
Trump's approval rating has taken a hit, with recent polls showing a decline in his economic approval to just 36%. Despite this, he remains optimistic, telling business leaders that growth is just around the corner. Trump is now asking for a little bit of time as he works to address these economic challenges. Let's take a listen in.
In the first quarter GDP numbers just out today, core GDP, now we're removing distortions from imports, inventories, and government spending, was up plus 3%. But this is Biden's economy because we took over on January 20th. And I think you have to get us a little bit of time to get moving, but this is the Biden economy. But we still had and we've had a lot of things happen since November 5th that helped this economy.
We move to a related development. Tensions are simmering again between Washington and Beijing over tariffs. A Chinese state-linked outlet says the Trump administration is quietly reaching out to restart talks, despite public claims that Beijing must make the first move. The Post suggests it's the US showing more urgency as pressure builds at home over shrinking trade and a slowing economy. President Trump, however, says he is not worried. Speaking at a cabinet meeting, he said China will eventually come around and that he actually wants China to succeed, but on fair terms. He also revealed potential trade deals with India, South Korea, and Japan, saying there's no rush because, in his words, the US is in the catbird seat. This comes as American shoppers start to feel the pinch from rising prices on Chinese imports, a side effect of Trump's sweeping 145% tariffs. Donald Trump has also revealed that Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is seeking a trade deal and plans to visit the White House within a week. Trump shared that he congratulated Carney on his election victory during a call on Tuesday. He described Carney as very nice and confirmed the upcoming visit. Trump also commented on the recent Canadian election, that it gave very mixed signals because it's almost even, which makes it very complicated for the country, is what he said. It's a pretty tight race. Let's listen in to what Trump had to say.
I spoke to him yesterday. He couldn't have been nicer, and I congratulated him. It was a very mixed signal because it's almost even, which makes it very complicated for the country. It's a pretty tight race, but he's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly, within the next week or less.
Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said Canada will only engage in trade and security talks with President Donald Trump on our terms. emphasising respect for Canadian sovereignty. Carney rejected Trump's repeated remarks about making Canada the 51st state, calling it unrealistic. Despite recent tensions, both leaders agreed to meet soon. Carney highlighted the importance of US-Canada trade, especially in energy and manufacturing. He also sees the upcoming G7 summit as crucial for shaping global trade relations. Here's what the Canadian Prime Minister said.
I would distinguish between what the President wants and what the President expects. Yes, he has this view of his territorial views. That's never, ever going to happen. You know, we deserve respect, we expect respect, and I'm sure we'll get it in due course again, and then we can have these discussions. Have a partnership on our terms. There's a win-win possibility there, but on our terms, not on their terms. So I'm not going as a tourist. Go when there's a serious discussion.
Now let's turn once again to the Middle East, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is warning that wildfires burning near Jerusalem could soon reach the city, calling it a national emergency. As the fires rage on, Israeli soldiers have been deployed to battle the flames, which have already forced the closure of major roads, including the main highway linking Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Thick smoke has blanketed the area and several communities have been evacuated. At least a dozen people have been hospitalized due to the fires. In response, Israel is receiving international assistance, with planes from Italy and Croatia expected to arrive soon to help combat the blazes. The Israeli military and emergency teams are working around the clock to contain the fire and protect Jerusalem. Let's now move over to the Indo-Pacific, where Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called on BRICS nations to stand firm on principles and lead efforts to safeguard global fairness and justice in the face of homogenism. Wang emphasized strengthening global South cooperation and upholding multilateralism at the BRICS meeting in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He noted President Xi Jinping's visit to the BRICS group's new development bank on Tuesday, reaffirming China's support for the bank. China looks forward to the bank and the BRICS family advancing together on the path of modernization, according to the foreign minister. Wang also outlined 3 key goals: defending the UN's central role, promoting peaceful dispute resolution, including in Ukraine and Gaza, and also fostering an open, cooperative global environment. He urged BRICS to remain inclusive and support the deeper integration of partner countries. Foreign ministers echoed concern over rising geopolitical tensions and protectionism, warning that reciprocal tariffs could destabilize global supply chains. They underscored the need to uphold multilateralism and the UN Charter to ensure stability and fairness in global governance. We once again move to the United States. In her first major speech since leaving office, former Vice President Kamala Harris sharply criticized President Donald Trump. Speaking at the Emerge Gala in San Francisco, Harris warned that Trump's ongoing conflicts with the courts were pushing the nation towards a constitutional crisis. She described his policies as a betrayal of American ideals, stating that instead of advancing the nation's values, the administration was abandoning them. Harris accused him of triggering what she called the greatest man-made economic crisis through his aggressive tariffs. Harris also condemned Trump's tariffs for raising costs on families and on businesses, warning of their long-term impact. This address marks a key moment for Harris as she considers her future political path amid growing Democratic leadership challenges. US President Donald Trump says that his administration may stop providing grants to Harvard University, citing the institution's refusal to comply with his demands. During a conversation with Education Secretary Linda McMahon, Trump commented that federal grants at the government's discretion. Let's take a listen in to what he said.
She's been incredible. She's very upset with Harvard. They have $53 billion in a fund, and yet they want more grants. And it looks like we're not going to be giving them any more grants, right, Linda? And, you know, a grant is at our discretion, and they're really not behaving well, so it's too bad.
The Trump administration has increased investigations into the university. It recently began reviewing nearly $9 billion in federal funding and demanded changes to campus policies on diversity, equity and inclusion and pro-Palestinian groups. Harvard has strongly opposed these measures, arguing that free speech and academic freedom are undermined. The tensions largely stem from pro-Palestinian protests on campus, with the administration accusing the university of supporting anti-Semitism, while Harvard defends its students' rights to express their political views. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.